You've been watching President Biden campaign for Virginia Democratic candidate for governor Terry McAuliffe. For more, I want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who was there at that rally in Arlington, Virginia. So, Ed, what stood out to you? I think for me, the number of times that I heard President Trump's name was something quite notable. What stood out to you?
Yep, I would say that was it, Elaine. The current president appearing to try to goad the former president into the fray here in the closing days, asking rhetorically why it is the Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin has said privately, not so publicly, at least not in recent months, that he supports the former president, supported his campaign, appreciates his support, but hasn't invited him to come here to campaign in the Old Dominion in the closing days. We should point out, when we talked to Glenn Youngkin last week about the fact that he's campaigning solo across the state with no outside Republican support, he made clear he wanted to win this on his own without out-of-state Republicans coming in to help. He called out Terry McAuliffe for campaigning with people like Stacey Abrams of Georgia, who, of course, lost her gubernatorial race in 2018, saying, I don't want to associate myself with people who lost political elections. So you can see what's going on here. The president, the biggest name in the party, coming here to try to stoke the base, to try to get them to turn out and vote, or vote early, or get their neighbors to do so, knowing that this is a really tight contest. Our polling unit gives it about a 2-point advantage to McAuliffe, which is a bit too close for comfort right now in a state that traditionally holds close statewide elections.
And Ed, do we know why this race has narrowed so much to the point where, you know, folks are looking at these really heavy hitters coming in now, and Democrats are privately, some of them expressing, you know, a bit of nervousness here. What is it that has really sort of propelled this narrowing that we've seen in recent weeks?
A few things, Elaine. First of all, history always usually shows that this state that holds its governor's race the year after a White House contest usually rewards the party not in power in the White House with the governorship. So McAuliffe is running against more than 40 years of political history. However, he defied it back in 2013 when he won his first contest for governor. Virginia is one of those states that doesn't let the governor run for consecutive terms, so he's trying again as soon after as he could. So he knows he's got political history against him, and this state keeps to that usually. Second, this president, despite winning by 10 points last year here, has seen his popularity and his approval rating slip considerably into the low 40s, especially troubling to see for Democrats that his numbers have slipped among independent voters, and that his support has softened with Democrats. Third, Youngkin has done something affirmative. He's managed to make this contest about an actual issue other than President Biden, other than Donald Trump. It's a focus on parental control of education, tapping into national concern that we've seen at school board meetings and city council meetings across the country as people show up to protest mask mandates, closing schools, and other social policy issues that are being negotiated or discussed about possibly being implemented in schools. It's big here in Northern Virginia. And in a debate a few weeks ago, Terry McAuliffe made some kind of a comment that said he doesn't think that parents should have a say in their child's education. What he was trying to do was explain away a bill he vetoed when he was governor that, as he put it to me, would have essentially allowed 25 different parents to come into the classroom and tell teachers to teach their kids 25 different books. Thing is, it played well in a political ad that Youngkin's been running across the state, and the gap has narrowed ever since. So education, suddenly Republicans see as an issue that they can potentially win on, and he's been driving it home hard, so much so that McAuliffe and his team seem to know, because they're talking about it too now, public education, and which of these two guys could potentially better control the state schools.
And, you know, Ed, I know you were on the campaign trail, and you've been on the campaign trail talking to voters as well. What have been the concerns that they have expressed to you? Because I recall one of the voters you talked to felt quite strongly about education and the very issue that you were just outlining.
Yeah, that is definitely one issue of concern we've heard about, certainly from supporters of Youngkin. We actually, and I think we have this, spoke with some people here at this rally a little earlier about why they think the contest is so close.
I think it is because we are a closely divided state. Yes, we have gone blue, but I've been here long enough, to know when we didn't also, when we had Republican governors. So And it's really about who turns out from what part of the state. And we know that Northern Virginia is more blue, Southern Virginia is more red.
It's because of what's happening in D.C. Our politicians are not making any decisions or on the infrastructure bill, on the care economy. People feel like, okay, we worked so hard, for our issues. We came out to vote, and nothing, if they feel as if nothing is getting done.
So really interesting to hear, Ed, from the voters themselves. I'm reminded as well at the top of the president's remarks, there appeared to be some kind of interruption. And I wonder if you could explain for our viewers, Ed, what we know about what happened there, because it was a little bit difficult to hear watching at home what was happening.
Yeah, this happens at most Democratic campaign events these days involving the president or vice president. In this case, it was just a handful of activists pushing for citizenship for undocumented immigrants. The president said to them, let's try to talk about this afterward. That's a line that he used during his campaign events, the few big ones he held during the pandemic campaign last year, where he tried to say, hey, I get your point, let's try to talk about this after, and then made the point that unlike Trump rallies back in the day, he doesn't want to violently remove people from his events. There were a few others further back saying things like, figure it out with Joe Manchin regarding climate change and Black Lives Matter. Typical for these kinds of Democratic events where they can try to get within earshot of the president and get us to talk about their issue of concern.
Finally, Ed, give us a big picture here. Obviously, we're looking at this through the lens of the 2022 midterms. How much is riding on this particular contest in Virginia?
Well, obviously it's one state, and it's a state that holds its statewide elections in odd-numbered years. But Democrats and Republicans both understand that some of the themes, some of the things that work here and don't work here are likely going to be replicated or not replicated by Democrats and Republicans across the country next year. And here's the thing. Virginia has become, at the presidential level at least, and at the congressional level, a Democratic state. So if they can't get a Democrat elected at the governor level, that spells trouble potentially for Democrats in places like North Carolina to the south, Georgia further south than that. Might make it difficult for them to campaign in Florida against popular Ron DeSantis. Could make it hard to win in places like Arizona, Ohio, Wisconsin next year. So there's a lot of concern that it'll signal that something's going wrong with what Democrats are up to. That's why McAuliffe has said to Congress and to the president, pass those darn bills already to demonstrate that you're doing your job. It's why they were willing to bring the president back here, but quickly and in a very Democratic part of the state, and with just a week to go. This appearance has been panned by Republicans saying, why would you want to appear with an unpopular president? Well, we'll see if it works or not, if it contributes. And we'll see if all the other appearances by the former president, by Kamala Harris, by Joe Biden help or hurt. And it might also give us a sense of which one of those big names is an effective surrogate for Democrats up and down the ballot next year. And if Youngkin prevails and does it all on his own, it'll signal to Republicans in more competitive races where the former president didn't do well that you got to go out and do it on your own without his public help, and you have to talk about issues and things in the affirmative that you would do to win. Lots of lessons potentially to be learned, and I know you and I will be talking a lot about it next Tuesday night.
And I can't wait for that. All right, Ed O'Keefe at Virginia Highlands Park in Arlington, Virginia. Ed, great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Take care.